All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining today's Dashboard Server 6.1 release webinar. Second time's a charm. Hopefully, GoToWebinar will hold up the entire time, which is good. More than could be said last week. I've already done the can you see me and hear me thing, so I can just launch straight into it, which is awesome. So firstly, just to really quickly introduce myself. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm a Director of Engineering, and I'm also a Product Manager here at Squared Up, which is why you have me here today presenting this webinar. I'm the product manager for Dashboard Server, also the plugins for our cloud products. And it's my engineering team that have been working on Dashboard Server on what we're going to see today. And I'm very excited to show you what we have in store. But first, just a quick analogy to kind of set the stage really as well, what the theme of this release is. So obviously this is a mosaic, and clearly each individual brick is not super meaningful, but overall it creates a picture, and that picture is valuable. And as is quite similar with this Dashboard Server release, there are lots of really small features in it, but there's lots of them that are quality and that are focused on addressing specific customer pain points. So the sum is greater than the individual parts. Lots of quality of life improvements and fixes that I hope you will agree are of great addition to Dashboard Server. All right, so without further ado, let's dig into all the cool stuff. So as ever, I usually try and summarize the whole release in a single dashboard. And as always, I fail to do so because not everything is visual. There are some changes that are a bit more nuanced. But you'll probably, the keener-eyed among you, will have seen some of the changes from this dashboard alone. But let's not leave you guessing. Let's get straight into the new features that we have in store. The first thing to show you is essentially trend lines on the line graph. So the line graph clearly is not a new visualization. It's been around for quite some time and is the bread and butter of seeing performance data from SCOM and other sources. But the trend line is a new addition. On the display panel of the tiles visualization, we have a new checkbox to show a trend line, and we can adjust how much trend, how much of the future we show, which is quite useful when you're looking at lines like the one on this screenshot right here that doesn't appear to be doing a whole bunch, but over time is trending in the upward trajectory and is clearly visible when you overlay the trend line and expand the future out. So again, a small feature that will make a big difference for seeing why something is in the state it's in, rather than just showing you the data. Next thing to mention is some changes around EAMX. So if those of you who aren't familiar, EAMX is essentially our tier of Dashboard Server that brings you the benefits of our cloud product and integrations as well. From our cloud products, we pull down our cloud products notifications, which look like this. This is a screenshot of an email notification. And clearly this is quite useful because you can see what's going on here. Free storage space monitor changed from success to error because the value is less than the threshold. Fine, that's really useful. It tells me what's going on. There's a screenshot in there to see a preview of what's going on and links. I can drill down into the data in question. Great, except for up until this release, this is what the SCOM alert that we would raise from that notification looked like. Now, I don't know about you, but this is not super useful. The description is blank. None of the properties in context are really valuable at all. The title in Dashboard Server is concatenated, so from what you get, you just can't make head or tail of what exactly it is that the problem is, except it's something to do with free storage space. You have to infer and you have to drill down into cloud to see the answer. I'm pleased to say that we've done some work in this area. So now alerts in SCOM from your cloud notifications are a lot more sensible. So we've sanitized the names for the monitors, the titles. They now have a description that is descriptive, and we have all the information you would need in the context pane of the UI, which means you don't always have to drill down into clouds to see what's going on. A really important quality of life type feature again. Next thing, moving on, entirely different theme really, around user personalization is the ability to undo changes you've made I'm sure you've all been there. I mean, I certainly have in preparation for this webinar, where you accidentally delete a tile from a dashboard and are kicking yourself because you've forgotten what exactly it was you've configured. Wouldn't it be nice if there were an undo button to be able to bring the deleted tile back from the dead? And sometimes you want to repeat steps you've made that you've previously undone. Well, good news, those things are now both possible until you effectively refresh the dashboard itself or change page, essentially. You can step back through all the changes you made and forward through all the changes you've made. It's a really nice quality of life improvement that will help when authoring dashboards. New functionality in 6.1. In 6.0, we released some changes around. We released auditing as a whole feature, entirely new in Dashboard Server 6.0. In 6.1, we've continued to improve on that original release of that feature. What we've done, the relatively minor additions, essentially. The first thing that we've done is when searching, originally you could search for a user, some content, team folders, or EA's enterprise applications, but you could not search for folders. And it was really annoying because sometimes the dashboard you wanted to know about was in a folder. You could obviously search for the dashboard name, but it was an irritation for sure. Now you have the ability to search for a folder to see what's happened with its contents. And again, quality of life feature. Other thing that is sort of important is in previous releases in 6.0, we didn't always show the team folder name that the piece of content in question, the dashboard, was contained in, which was annoying because sometimes where you moved a dashboard between team folder, you wanted to see that. You ended up with user created or default user created ... which is annoying and is not that descriptive. So what you really want is the team folder name, as you can see in my screenshots here, versus these previous time-stamped auditor events, essentially from the 6.0 webinar timeframe, which don't include the team folder name. Other feature which is quite useful here is cool. So you've done your initial searching, you've found your dashboard, you've picked your time frame, and you want to be able to filter down on the events you're seeing to only see a subset. Well, in 6.0, this was possible, but you had to pick a single type of events to filter on. So, for example, a dashboard move or dashboard delete or something. Well, now you can add as many different types as you like, which gives you a lot more control without having to fall back to the raw SQL data within your audit database. So that's another nice quality of life feature that will make sifting and sorting through audits a lot easier. Now, this next one, gosh, this one was requested so many times over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It is a seemingly small feature that is going to have a large impact to a large number of customers, and that is the addition of the 24-hour clock. Sounds super minor, but it's quite an important feature. Up until this release, we've only been displaying times in the 12-hour clock format, which is fine, it's functional, it works, but the reality is there are some countries around the world where the 12-hour clock is just not used, so it's irrelevant. So 24-hour clock format is now supported. This is a global setting set within system. I'll show you what this looks like in a second in the demo, obviously, and will help a lot with users understanding the data they're seeing. Equally, in the same vein, we've made some changes to the number formatting. This is another thing that sounds minor, that is in fact pretty major if you're a day-to-day user of Dashboard Server. Up until this release, you had to understand SI units, which again were correct. They were just not that intuitive to someone that's used to dealing with the sorts of data the SCOM and the sorts of systems you'll be plugging into share data in. What do I mean specifically here? I mean large numbers and small numbers. In the case of large numbers, let's say we're talking about 600,000 megabytes of free disk space, you'd end up with the SI units variant saying 600K of megabytes of free disk space. Now, again, that is correct, it's just not super meaningful. Whereas now you can set the ability to display that data with a comma separator. That has the other added advantage of adding an extra degree of accuracy here, because we're not rounding the data at all, as you would see with SI units. And with small numbers, so this is loosely anything smaller than 1, So 0.8 to 0.6. When you're talking about average number of connections, for example, you might get into use cases that require seeing small numbers. With SI units, you'd see a milli-unit or a micro-unit, which is super meaningless for the majority of us, versus 0.8, 0.5, etc., which is a lot more meaningful for those dealing with the sorts of metrics we're trying to see in Dashboard Server. So sounds small is a big deal. Moving on. On performance tiles, when you drill down into performance tiles, we've added a few new options that are quite useful and important. In prior releases, you had a compare button in the top right corner. Up here, where we have settings now, we've added a settings box, which is cool. Why we've done that is because we've added some new options, essentially. What have we added? Well, we've added the ability to toggle on or off the trend line from the line graph visualizations. You've seen that at the dashboard level in my earlier screenshots. It's possible to toggle this on or off on the drill down as well. Also, we have the ability to fiddle with the data range to specify percentages, fit to data, custom, etc., which are quite useful when you're trying to deal with a large volume of data that you might want to zoom in or out on, essentially. There is another change in this area which is quite valuable, which is on the far right hand side over here. We've tidied up the visualization here so we can fit more min, max and average details in the view, which is cool in the first place, but also if you click min, max and average, you can overlay a line onto the graph in a similar way to how we might overlay the trend line to show the min, max and average, which is quite useful when understanding the data. So that's new in this release as well. We've also got these buttons on the far right hand side that let you reset the trend line and also go further into the future, which are quite useful again when sifting and sorting. Next up, we have a really small feature that I always chuckle about when I see, because it seems so minor, the ability to align the scalar tiles contents, but this has been requested so many times. Ultimately, when you're building your one killer single pane of glass style dashboard, and you're looking to make it look as good as you can make it look, things like this matter. So this is the ability, obviously, to align the contents of the scalar tile to the left or the right, as well as what you currently have, which is the center. And it works as you would expect, essentially, really quite simple. And the final thing to mention is performance improvements across the board, in particular when in the Vader Analyze mode. Nothing to see here, so you won't see this in the demo. But what you would see in Analyze mode is an increased load in previous releases on SCOM management service, as we're constantly looking up things. And because we were constantly making calls, we were increasing the chance of locking up your browser. So essentially, Vader Analyze mode will now work much better as expected. We've also done some optimization to how the initial dashboard server page loads to improve its speed, and this is done through loading libraries in the background, things that will make no difference to you as an end user. So there we go. Lots of improvements there. So that's great, Bruce, lots and lots of slides. Let's have a look at it in action. This is where we go into demo mode, and I hope that everything in my demo lab works as expected. So the first thing I'm going to show you, if I go onto my new dashboard, is those EAMX alerts. So we have some examples at the top here, but what I'm going to show you is this in action from our cloud product, because that's ultimately the product that generates these notifications. So if I go into cloud, this is a Squelette Cloud dashboard, and on it I have a bunch of tiles. This one in particular I'm going to fiddle with, this new bugs tile. It shows a number of bugs that are new within the 24-hour time frame. Great. Obviously, it's just demo data, so it's not super meaningful. But in clouds, I have the ability to turn on monitoring like this. This is within the tile editor. And so we can say, I want this to generate an error when there are more than, whatever, let's say greater than one issues in this case. So we're talking about bugs in this case. A warn in another case. So in this case, I'm going to say, for the purposes of a demo, warn when there are more than 0 bugs, and error when there are more than 1 bug. I'm going to save this, and what I should see is that this tile gets a health state. And there it is, it's turned amber, states warning, the same as the one above. In Cloud, this health is flowed up through the dashboard, which has health, as you can see, through to the workspace at the top level. But it will also, if I go through to now Slack, generate, when configured, a notification, which is what I've just got it to do, to essentially send through one of these useful and meaningful notifications that tells me what has gone wrong based on the monitor conditions that I set as the administrator, along with that tile preview. And bear in mind, that's what we're looking to now see in SCON as alerts. So that alert will take a little while to kind of come through. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look in true demo style at one I brought through earlier, which is this one here, which is all entirely same. Follow-up bug count is 3, which is greater than the warning threshold of 2. This is the other tile that was on that dashboard I was showing you from Cloud. We have the state reason, we have the last state change date, we've got sensible descriptions, we have the link to the dashboard in Cloud that we can then drill down into if we want to see the raw data and the list of bugs in this case. Obviously, I'm using a noddy use case of bugs, but this applies to any use case that you're interested in from our Cloud product. Really cool. For the next feature, I'm going to demonstrate. We're going to look at timescales and SI units. Actually, let's look at timescales first. Timescales feature. So at the moment, you can see I've got 12-hour clock set because I've got 2 p.m. and I've got 5 a.m. here. Now, if I go into, in fact, before I go into settings, if I mouse over this line graph at the bottom, you'll see that the labels are also in the 12-hour format, which is obviously what you'd expect, as are the axes labels, so 6 p.m., 9 p.m., etc. Now, if I go into System, you will see a new tab here called Time Formats. And here we have the 12-hour clock setting, but also the 24-hour clock setting, which I can toggle on or off, and you'll see in the preview what this will do for the rest of the product. So that setting will flow through to all of the labels, all of the axes of graphs, every place where we display alerts, that kind of thing. And as I said earlier, because this is in System, this is a global setting. So if I now go back to my dashboard, you will see instantaneously we've got 1432 rather than 232. So 12 versus 24-hour clock format. And equally on the axes and labels of these graphs, line graphs, everything flows through as you would expect. Awesome. Next thing to show is the really simple but still worth showing custom justification of the scalar tile. So this is in Scalar over here, and as you would expect, I have the ability to align as I see fit, and that's really cool. Oh no, I've just deleted that tile. Oh, well, that's a perfect place to demonstrate my next feature, which is the ability to undo that change, or any number of changes I've made since I loaded the dashboard, which from the like hover over text, I can see 6 changes, which will be the alignment changes I was making. You can see the value of that where you're deleting a tile by accident. And this also applies when you're in a tile edit and you make a change to the tile itself. You'll still get these undo, redo buttons, which is great, super useful. Next thing to show, which you probably have already noticed, to be honest, because it's been on screen for a moment here, is these trend lines on line graphs. So here we go, here's one in action. We're looking at NIC bytes per second, the bottom 5 deliberately showing low amount of data throughputs here, and you can see here we've got one that's trending up here, and I can see from the hover over current values, I can see it obviously going up and down, and to the naked eye it doesn't appear to be doing that much, but the trend line shows that over time it is trending up. If I put this tile in edit mode and go to display, you can see where this is configured. So we have the ability to toggle it on or off and to set how much future we want essentially, and obviously this doesn't have a sort of scale on because it's relative to the tile and or dashboard timescale, which is cool. Equally, if I turn this off, turn off show trend, and I drill into this line graph here, obviously we're not showing the trend line because there was no trend line on the line graph that I drilled into. But if I go into settings, I can add the trend line in the drill down, which is cool. And then if I want to sift and sort and explore the data, I can click this button here to add more future and reset as needed, which is useful. We also, as I was saying earlier on, have the ability to scale and fit the data based on whatever you want, essentially, which is quite useful for understanding what it is exactly I'm seeing, especially when you've got a large number of things on the dashboard. We already had the ability to do this comparison thing before, which essentially flows through the scope from the high-level tile into the drill down. But obviously, if I want to look at a subset, I can remove some objects, which is cool. Let's just take 2 out of the picture and close this. And show the next feature, which is on the far right-hand side, my ability to overlay min, max, and average. So you can see here I've clicked max, and we get a dotted line that represents the max for each of the series on the line graph. Another good quality of life feature for understanding the shape of the data. And all the changes you make in this drill down are not persisted to the top level dashboard, they're just for your dashboard drill down instance effectively. So you can see here, if I come down back to the top level dashboard, none of those changes have been saved. And if I drill into that tile again, it resets. So that is worth knowing. Where to go next? Let's have a look at auditing next. Then we'll have a look at SCI units. So if I go into Explore Audit Events, as I mentioned in the slides, I have the ability to search by folder now. And I created for this webinar a DS-Eng team folder, which has no results over the last 24 hours, but over the last 6 months, I've forgotten when exactly I made some changes, you can see the changes, which is useful, obviously. Also, as I was showing you in the slides, we have the ability to, we've always had the ability to search by content, so I can search for my SCOM self-maintenance dashboard, but I want to see what happened with that dashboard. And here I can see it's been moved around and published and unpublished back in September, which was probably the time frame for the 6.0 webinar. This is my demo webinar DS instance after all. But you can see that we then have added the ability to expose the team folder name, so we can actually see which team folder it was moved into, which is super useful. But this is a good point to look at the filtering options. So right now I'm seeing all my filter events, every single one, and that is useful sometimes. But if we have large numbers of actions, let's say I include read events, for example, that list grows and we might not want to see all of the different types of event. Now, obviously I can toggle, untoggle read events. I'm doing this to illustrate the point, but I could also filter on the specific type of actions that I want to see from a large set of data. So let's say I'm only interested in unpublish and move events, let's say. I can add both of those things at the same time to sift and sort the data, which is super useful. And we've also done some work to sanitize the columns that we show, so we don't show some columns that are more internal. And the other thing we do, I don't know if it was even noticeable, but when you first come into auditing, we load a sample set of data, the most recent set of audit events, which is quite useful for just understanding what the data looks like, to know what a search might be useful to make to result in some meaningful results being shown. So that's auditing, and at least the changes in auditing. Next thing to go into then will be, let's have a look at SCI units next. For SCI units now, we're going to have a look at these two graphs at the bottom. We have large amounts of space, so this is essentially megabytes, and we have small units, which are where we show milli-units right now. If I go into system settings and to tap to time formats again, yeah, so you can see I had one set to SCI units and one set to separators. Thinking that was doing the demo just then, like I was expecting to see SCI units. Let's just set it to SCI units first. You can see a before and after for large number and for small number, and go back to that dashboard. So here we go. Large numbers. This is what I was expecting to see. For large numbers, we've got 6.42K of megabytes of free disk space, which is irritating, versus whatever it was in megabytes. And for small numbers, where we go below 1, this is the average number of connection attempts per second, top 10. We've got 483 milli connection attempts per second, which is correct, but is not the most meaningful. So now if I go back and toggle off, the SI units over here, so we'll have decimals and separators, please. You'll see the changes that are made to the bottom examples. So we go from milli-units to 0.0s, and we go from K units to a separator, comma separator. So we'll turn it now into decimals and separators and go back to our dashboard over here and scroll down, and ta-da, immediately we see something that's a bit more sane when dealing with megabytes. 7,416 megabytes. Notice the rounding there too. Because of the SI units, there was rounding taking effect. And for small units, 0.180 rather than 180 milli units, much more meaningful. So there we go. That is what there is to see. Really awesome set of features. I'm just thinking, did I miss anything? I don't think I did. So that's the sum set of what there is to show for this release. So I'm going to go back to slides now and carry on. So we're back in slide land. So one thing that I suspect a number of you will already be familiar with, I wanted to introduce in case you're not, is obviously we as a company have 2 products. We have our dashboard server product, which is based all around SCOM, and we have our cloud product. We've talked a bit about EAMX already, and they are clearly both valuable products with different pros and cons, but ultimately customers that I speak to sometimes want a single pane of glass. Now you can achieve this in our cloud product today. There is a SCOM plugin, but there are limitations to what we could do in the area of SCOM especially. And so for this reason, we have created our EAMX tier that integrates these 2 products. As you will know, our dashboard server product is on-prem hosted and is best of breed for SCOM. Unsurprisingly, the clue's in the name, it's called SCOM Edition. Dashboard server, by contrast, is cloud hosted, has loads and loads of plugins, and is all about this concept of data mesh, which is all about essentially rolling up and drilling it down into the data and essentially not data laking it all, pulling data on demand, which is cool and is useful. But ideally, these products are best together, which is where EAMX comes in. With the EAMX, you get 3 cloud licenses and the ability to, using those licenses and the dashboards you build, roll the health from what you build in cloud up into dashboard server, or more specifically into SCOM, in the form of objects with their health. There's nothing new here, just explaining the differences and the concept here. We're working on this vision all the time. You saw a small feature in the form of improved alerts. We're going to be working to deepen this story over time to come up with a more comprehensive single pane of glass vision and product that will integrate in new and interesting ways. That's all I'll say for now. But if you haven't heard of EAMX and our cloud products, please do check it out. So all that's really left to say is that Dashboard Server 6.1 release candidate is available right now from download.squaredup.com. It's actually been available since the last release webinar scheduled date. We didn't take it down. But what that does mean is you can go and get it today. So please do go download it. As is very common for our products, upgrade isn't in place, so you haven't got to do a side-by-side migration or anything like that. And obviously, as an RC customer, you will get priority support, which is super awesome. GA, general availability, is going to be probably 2 weeks from now, so towards the end of February. But really, that depends on what you guys find as far as potential issues are concerned. So please do go and get Dashboard Server 6.1 today. If you have any feedback on what we've been building, both in Dashboard Server and in cloud, I would love to hear it, either now or in other places. So all that's left to do is to turn the floor over to questions and see what we've got. I think there are already some questions. So let's have a look and see what they are. Let's see. I have several folk that have trouble with the SI units. It's great. It has the option for proper numbers. I agree. This has been a bugbear for a while. People aren't used to SI units at the end of the day. Good to hear that feature has landed well. Thank you for that comment. Next question. Is it possible to select an individual graph from the line graph instead of having to hover over it? So in the high-level dashboard, you can obviously change the scope to only include a single object, and on the drill down you have the option to filter in or out objects, but nothing else essentially is possible. But that's because the reality of that is, if you're looking to understand the data, drilling down is more useful because you have all of those options that I showed earlier on today. Good question all the same. Next question, any possibility to export Excel files, CSV, the named users? Oh, that's a good question. I don't think the answer is yes off the top of my head, because I'm fairly certain that's in the backlog. It's something that we will consider for a future release, for sure. I'd be interested to understand your use case. Why do you want to know that? Because ultimately you can see that in Dashboard Server. So if you have a use case to go with the question, I would love to have it. Next question then is from David. Is Azure SCOM managed instance on the product roadmap? Well, actually, SCOM managed instance is already supported. So yes, by virtue of the fact it's already been done. Ultimately, SCOM managed instance is SCOM as we know it, but hosted by Microsoft, which is always good. But what it does mean is all the SDK calls we make and all the APIs we need and the database we know is there in the back end. So SCOM managed instance is supported in beta form right now. We need to go and give it a test. It's also true of our cloud products. We support both SCOM managed instance and regular SCOM. So that's that one. Oh, and then a bit of appreciation for the features and me presenting. Thanks very much, Anders, for those. Appreciated. Some love coming in for the undo button. Good to see that's landed well as well. Thank you. Then do you set the unit types and time format per user, or is this set for the entire squared up instance? Good question. That's from Michael. That is a global setting, so you would go in there as the DS administrator and set that for the entire instance. It's not currently possible to set on a per user basis. I'd be interested to hear feedback if that's a request, if you like the ability to set those units on a per user basis. I'd like some more details as to why you'd like those, that functionality, if that's what's being requested, but at the moment it is global. Let's see if there are any more questions. That is the list as I have it. Are there any final questions? Just give it another moment. Silence so far. All right, in which case, thank you very much for attending. I hope this has been useful. Oh, there is another question. Time frame settings as a normal user would be nice. International company, yeah, understandable. It would be good to get more detail on the details there as to which time zones and countries have a preference for which different way of seeing time and units, because that would help with prioritization too. I think that's the last question. Yes, it is. All right, thank you very much for watching. Go and download Dashboard Server 6.1 now and let us know what you think of it. I'm looking forward to sharing more of the roadmap and being with you in upcoming webinars. Until next time, thank you very much. Goodbye.